And so it's not bad to utilize those things, but it is bad for me to do it so I don't have to grow.
Yeah.
Or because I don't want to
exactly.
grow.
That knowing them helps you not only take advantages of your strength as an individual, but know where maybe you do need to press in. Like, so for example, if somebody we have over here as far as like being sober-minded or being hospitable or being gentle, right? There's certain people so I'll bring up the guy that I talked about before, that he's not trying to argue with people. He just likes pushing back a lot because that's kind of how he processes things. He, when we've had conversations, has really had to work on the gentle part of being like just listening, just being able to listen to people and what they're going through and not automatically come back at them, because that's just his personality. And I think when you know people, right? So you probably have them too. There's people at our church, little old ladies that just want to unload on you because they're widowers. They don't have a lot of people to talk to, and they will talk your ear off forever if you let them, because they don't have anybody to talk to. And knowing as a pastor, obviously there's boundaries and time settings and all of that, but knowing when to just be like, all right, go for it. I got 15 minutes. Just let them go for it. But you know when you're able to do that, and that they need that because you know them. And I think that relational aspect is so neglected sometimes. Not to get off on a tangent here, but I've had to do some background research on Charles Stanley because of a video I'm doing on Andy Stanley. And, people feel all different kinds of ways about Charles Stanley, apparently. But one of the things that keep coming up is that, like, he was very relational with people. And so through a lot of the situations, apparently, in his life that he was going through, that was very helpful in regards to sort of how he pastored, was knowing people, being very relational with them. And not only individually, again, I watched my first full Charles Stanley sermon like 2 weeks ago when I did a review on him. So it's not like I'm an expert, but all of the feedback I got was that a lot of people that have watched him forever, apparently like my grandma used to, was that you could feel that relational sort of bent that he had, even when you didn't know him, even when it was coming through a television. And so I think as a pastor, that's such a key point, is that you have to know your people. Like, you can't just be like, I'm the pastor of whatever church. No, you're the pastor of these people. And do you know them? And can you speak into these situations? And really the cool thing about this, and maybe you might be able to give a little bit more insight on this, but they're actually going to, maybe sometimes going to directly point out to you, but I think more in indirect ways, you're going to see sort of your strength and weaknesses through them as far as how you interact with them, and then be able to sort of grow in them depending on kind of, again, the multiple varieties of people you interact with.
Yeah. I mean, I think it might, for the listener, seem like we've gone off completely off topic,
Yeah.
but we actually haven't, because the whole premise of the conversation has been about doing things intentionally that you're not good at naturally, or that you find difficult naturally. And we wouldn't, I think neither of us would be able to have the conversation go where it has gone up to right now without having forced ourselves into these positions to know the things that we're talking about. So here, another example, I think, of this relational thing and longing. So Proverbs 1:5 says, let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. And the scriptures often talk about continuing to learn. That the scriptures are sufficient in that as well. It's something that we learn from the scriptures, is that lifelong learning is important. You see through the Gospels, the disciples develop as they walk with Christ. You see Peter forced to do something he's not comfortable with, and going to Cornelius and his household, and which is it's anathema in their culture, right? To go and have conversation with these Gentiles and present the gospel to them and all this stuff. Now he went because the Lord told him to, but isn't that what we're talking about, right? And so you actually see example of this in the scriptures. And I think in my own, this has only been on the table for the past couple of days, and so I'm not even sure if this is possible, but it's been in my head a little bit to see if, and talk to the seminary that I'm attending, to see if I could tag on some extra classes at the end and fulfill not only my Master of Divinity, but also gain their Master of Arts in Theological Studies with an emphasis in counseling, biblical counseling. And that I think would serve me in multiple ways. One, it would help with this relational thing. It would help give me comfort and frankly more wisdom as to how to handle situations that come up that are difficult. And that right now I might be in a position where I have to prep for some meetings like this that are really difficult, and I have to think through them. And not that I will never not have to do that at some level, but and I even think that counseling would help me help grow my preaching. And that's even an area. So this is maybe a path to go down as well, honestly, with the whole conversation, because preaching, I think, is a gift for me. But there is no gift that cannot be improved upon, right? So there are aspects of my preaching that sometimes I feel like are lacking. I think it's fairly easy for me to preach to the head, and it's work for me to preach to the heart.
Let me be a Stephen Furtick audience member going, that's good. Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah. But some intentional training in biblical counseling, and from different perspectives, and it will help me, I believe, grow in sympathy, and help me, I believe, in preaching to the heart as well. And so I think there's an expectation in the scriptures that we're going to continue to learn, or that we should continue to learn. It's part of us becoming more and more Christ-like in this life. And there's learning and growth that can happen in the areas that you already see as gifts for you. And really it's intentional when you continue to learn things and grow and continue training. And so I like, that's just something that I've just recently started thinking about, and I don't even know if it's possible, but I think that it would be helpful. And there will at least be some electives probably that I take, even if that other degree path doesn't happen, but for that specifically. But
I think that's good. Well, and so I think that's good to tie in to this before we go down that path. So we're talking about the qualifications for elder a lot. I don't know of anybody that has been ever presented as pastor that is like 100% on all of these. Like there's some people that obviously are like incredibly self-controlled, very respectable, maybe a little hospitable. They're pretty good at preaching. Like nobody comes in as like, man, this is the dude that knocks everything out of the park. Usually, obviously there's none that are disqualifying. That would obviously be an issue and a big red flag, but he's maybe not exactly great in all of these. And these are the things obviously that, you don't have to be 100 in all of them, but they're identifiable, at least in you, that this is one of those things. And I think that's what, sort of to tie into what you're saying there, is that when somebody comes into the pastorate, maybe you're not great at hospitality, but you're willing to learn, or you're willing to sort of be like, it sort of gives me an anxiety attack if somebody's going to come over all the time. But I know that it's like, it's a thing that needs to happen, and I'm willing to grow in it. And even I think what you said there, pairing that with saying like, I'm good at this, but I think I could be better at this, is something that I don't want to say I don't often see in people, but sometimes I think the longer some people are in ministry, they just sort of settle into this like, well, I'm just not going to be like, this is it. This is as good as it gets. And there's not
This is
really,
me.
yeah, this is me. This is my personality. And
Hmm.
and so they're just like, well, this is what you're getting as regards to like preaching, or this is what you're getting in regards to counseling. And there are some, like to give a little bit of grace here, I think there are some things that you can pivot to somebody that is incredibly gifted in that area and
Yeah.
say they're going to do this better. But I think that shouldn't be a cop out for you not growing in an area. So maybe you're not the best. I mean, we'll go with counseling, right? So maybe you're not the best counselor, and somebody over here is. And it's great to refer them. But if you recognize that, like you just said, if you recognize that, why not try to get better? Not to outdo this person that you already send people to, but to say like, well, this is obviously an area that I'm not real good at. And because I'm not really good at it, maybe I could get at least better at it. Maybe so I don't have to shove everybody this direction and only some people that direction. That's the same thing with, I mean, even in preaching, like you're talking about, there's two things that you said, or one thing that you said there that I think was really important. And then I want to tack on something is that so often our preaching comes from our personality. And so sometimes it's really easy to get in a flow because we think of things in a certain way and then we process and preach it that way. And we miss a good portion of the congregation because they don't do it that way. I'm very, very similar to what you said. Like, I'm very much like, here's the information. Here it is, understandably. Now apply it. But there's people out there that are much more like, I'm not by nature, and this is something I have to force myself into a lot. And luckily, I have a wife and a daughter that are opposite me at this, so I'm like oftentimes have to process through it a lot more than I would normally if I was just some single dude somewhere. But like, I'm not naturally empathetic. I'm just not. I'm like, here's the facts. Do that.
Yep.
I don't know why it's a problem for you. And so, because that's how I process things. And so what's helpful is that, to remember that like when I'm preaching, that's great for maybe half of the congregation. But the people that are much more empathetic or like need things communicated in certain ways, I'm missing them. And so to grow in that a little bit, I think like what you said about preaching to the head versus the heart thing is when we understand that, like even if we're really good, and this is where I think sometimes when we know we're lacking in something, those are things that are really easy to grow in because we're like, we're going to have to force ourselves to do that. We know we're not good at it. But in the case
Yeah.
of something we're really good at, we don't like oftentimes we don't want to get better at it because we're already good at it. We're scared to try new things. I remember I can preach from the New Testament fairly easily. Preaching from the Old Testament, like the Psalms or the Proverbs, is like something I had to force myself to do. I wasn't super comfortable with it because, again, Proverbs or wisdom literature, Psalms aren't like didactically out like a New Testament epistle would be, and so those things were a little bit more difficult. And so forcing yourself into it and being like, I might really fail at this, but doing it in such a way for the benefit of obviously your growth, but so that you can connect to those other people in the congregation as well. Anybody that watches the sermon reviews know I'm not a huge fan of illustrations, but I understand that they are beneficial for some people as long as they're kept, I think, within parameters that are reasonable. But that's one of the things too, is that there's some people that need those. There's some people out in the congregation that need that to be communicated a certain way. And so saying like, I'm really good at this, but I could grow at it, I think is something that a lot of people don't push themselves at because they're already good at X, Y, or Z. So why even try to get better at it? But when we realize, especially as pastors, like there's some people that I'm missing out here because I am just talking to the head and not the heart.
Yeah.
And being able to communicate that, I think that's a great insight that you brought up there.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that it tends to just be, it's not as though I think we do that intentionally overlook necessarily, because I think it's just a blind spot because we figure, I'm God's gifted me here. I need to focus on this. Right. And while that's not wrong, it's not necessarily complete. And so this is a topic I think that that has a lot to help us with, honestly. And I think one of the things that you run into at times is a church that has the budget to have multiple pastors. So, and I'll use me as an illustration. If we were to hire someone, it may be tempting to pick someone to do the things that I'm not good at, so I won't have to. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, for sure.
that
Yeah.
might be a real situation. And in
That's
fact,
why there
there
are
are,
specifically teaching pastors. Like that is your job.
yeah, yep, yeah, and teaching pastors, pastors of visitation. I mean, some people that they thrive off that. It really lifts them up. They're encouraged by those visits, and they live off of it. But don't ask me to preach all the time, right? And for those guys, they would fit into that pastor of visitation kind of thing. Now, I'm not going to say that it's bad to do those things as a church, but it is something that we should, I think, proceed with intentionality and caution, even, so that this guy is still learning to preach the word, and this guy is still learning to visit and be relational and know the people. And you really, you can't find yourself in a position where you're hiring somebody to do the thing that is just as much elder ministry, and it's just not elder ministry that you're super good at. There are elders who aren't paid staff at our church who are more gifted than me at certain things, and it's not wrong of me to. So, as a for instance, there are a couple of elders specifically that have been married for like 150 years, right? And they have solid Christian marriages. It would not be wrong of me to point a couple toward them to do some mentoring or that kind of thing. It would be wrong of me to do that if I did that so I wouldn't have to deal with it, or because my marriage is kind of rocky and I don't want to deal with that, so go talk to them. Like, so you can do that in a sinful way, or in a way that's not helpful. And yet you could, God has also gifted people differently on purpose, as that's the way he does everything, on purpose, right? So he's blessed Irv and Marty with a wonderful marriage for a lot of years. They just celebrated their 50th a couple weeks ago, and it's been a blessing to have them, and him as an elder, and so if I have people who are trying to wade through financial ruin or anything like that they have brought upon themselves or whatever, I'm going to be able to offer them some biblical principles and stuff, but Irv is going to be able to offer them lots of experience and lots of wisdom that I just don't have yet. And the same way with marital things, like I can talk about Donna and I can talk about biblical principles, but if you want somebody who's been married for 50 years and who really loves one another and who I think is a good picture for the body to look at, I can give you his number or call him and set up a meet or whatever. And so it's not bad to utilize those things, but it is bad for me to do it so I don't have to grow, or because I don't want to grow.